Saturday, February 17th, 2024. My name's Joe. Today we're joined with Brad. This video will be posted to both of our channels, but Brad, once again, thanks for your time. We've had some interesting discussions as of lately, and we want to share them on a video. But before we get started, I want to give a disclaimer that nothing that is said in this video is intended to be financial advice. You should consult with a trusted professional before acting on anything you may hear. So always do your own research. We can give full transparency about our opinions and strategies around this subject matter, but we're not financial experts, and once again, not advice. Brad, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on again. I'm really looking forward to having this discussion.
Yeah, so we've been talking about some of these global economic trends that we're seeing, and there may be some concern or cause for skepticism around the narrative that we're hearing as far as, well, the global economy is just fine and there's going to be a soft landing around any sort of fiscal concerns present. But there's this belief that the crypto sector of finance is completely separate and unaffected from the economic trends. What is your opinion on that? I know you have a strong opinion, and I love the way you present it. So I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah. So, like I would say I'm seeing this a lot, right? Where people are saying that, crypto is completely separate from the macroeconomic factors. And I mean, we have a historical precedent here. We saw this in the flash crash in March of, I think it was 2020. Everything happened in conjunction. And it makes sense. Like I think Bitcoin, and eventually I think it can be somewhat independent, but today there's still definite correlation. And when you think about this, like in order to have a bull market, you have to have retail come into the space. And we haven't gotten to that point yet where retail's really come in strong, but that is the recipe for a bull cycle. And if we have an economic downturn where people are losing their jobs and they don't have disposable income to throw into a risk on asset like crypto, well, you're not going to have a bull market. So I think people need to be aware of some of the things that are happening in the global economy and how that could impact this upcoming market cycle. Because I think we do a lot of people in the space, it's fun to look at the upside scenarios, and I think those could definitely play out, but you need to also take into consideration all possible scenarios. And there is, there are some concerning signs right now in the global economy that could come into play and impact this upcoming market cycle. So, I mean, do you have anything to add before I kind of kick into with some of the warning signs?
Go ahead, take it away.
Okay. So number one is commercial real estate. So we're seeing really high vacancies, after COVID, when people start working from home, a lot of companies have continued to allow people to work from home, and we're seeing really high vacancies, and they seem to be climbing. Actually, December numbers were really alarming. And a lot of these commercial real estate assets are very much underwater. Okay. And where that comes into play is we have a lot of banks that have exposure to commercial real estate, not just the US, but globally. Like China has a lot of exposure to our commercial real estate. And that's not a good thing, because if you know what the reserve rate is, so this kind of plays into this a little bit, but it used to be like if you put $1,000 into the bank, they had a 10% reserve rate. So of your $1,000, they would have to keep $100 in cash on hand for people to withdraw money. And in March, I believe it was March of 2020, they lowered that to 0%. So for a few years now, our banks have had a 0% reserve rate, meaning that they can loan out the money that you put into your bank, and they can buy bonds and put your money really wherever they want. And that works really well as long as they're getting a return on your money. But they're holding on to a lot of commercial real estate assets, and if they have to liquidate those, they'd have to do so at a pretty hefty loss. And we're starting to see this with some of the smaller regional banks are starting to get really impacted by their exposure. So I do think if this commercial real estate issue becomes a bigger issue, we're going to see more of these small regional banks fail. And the whole bet here is that the big banks will continue buying up the small banks for pennies on the dollar, and that they'll become too big to fail. And that may be the case, but at the same time, if it starts hitting headlines that these small regional banks are failing, it could cause somewhat of a panic, and it could impact the stock market and the economy in general. And you notice like they haven't really put it in the headlines a lot because they don't want to panic right now. So I don't, I think commercial real estate could be the thing that kind of pushes things over the edge at some point. The question is really when that happens. But aside from the commercial real estate thing, you have the job market. So it started off in tech, right? When the interest rates started going up, and it makes sense that tech was the first to be impacted because, a lot of these tech companies had overhired, but they had such easy access to capital. When the Fed rate was 0%, they could get funding very easily because, well, you couldn't put money in bonds and get any type of return. You couldn't put money in, your bank account. Your savings account wasn't yielding anything in money markets. So people were trying to get a return on their money. And that's why everyone was thrown in the stock market. They're thrown into these tech companies trying to get some type of return on their money. And these tech companies got easy access to capital. And they were basically able to like just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks and hire up. And, when the Fed rate went up, that spigot kind of got turned off, right? And these tech companies had to start focusing on their profit centers. And, when that happens, they had to shut down these more speculative verticals. And with that, they had to lay people off. And so it made sense it happened with tech first. But the thing that's concerning is it's now starting to hit other sectors of the economy. We had UPS lay a bunch of people off, PayPal, and we're starting to see a lot of layoffs across the country. And the job market's weakening, right? So with that, that's when you start seeing these leading indicators. We've seen this in the past with other recessions, right? So I think that it shouldn't be shocking though, because, the Fed raised rates faster than any time in history ever, right? And you think about the US economy as like this big ship. They raised rates, but it takes 12 to 18 months for those rates to ripple through the economy and have their impact, right? So, it doesn't just happen all at once. It's this big ship that takes a while to steer. And we're starting to see those impacts. Like the damage is done from that. The question is, how extensive is that damage? We don't know yet. And the other side of that, though, is you raise rates that quickly, there is a chance that at some point the other end of that hits very quickly, and things, when they start going down, could go down pretty quickly. And it's not like you can just lower rates to turn it back. It takes time. Again, once you mess with the Fed rate, for that to ripple through the economy. So, we could have this situation where we have a recession, and it could take a little while to get things back on track. And the other thing I'll say is, like, from an individual perspective, we're starting to see some really alarming signs from like credit card debt is up over $1.1 trillion across the country. And we're seeing default rates on credit cards and on auto loans are not looking pretty, man. And that makes sense too, because, during COVID, people had saved up a bunch of extra money, and, they weren't able to go out to restaurants, and they weren't able to go out and do social things that, generally you'd be spending money on. And they had all this extra capital saved up. So when inflation hit, they weren't really feeling it so much because they had extra savings. But by all reports, those extra savings have been burned through at this point, and people are really starting to feel inflation, and they've been putting stuff on credit cards. Well, that doesn't last forever, man. Like, we have limits on our credit cards. We can't just print money like the US government does, right? So that's also another issue at play. Plus, the inflation numbers are kind of bullshit anyway. Like, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, right? They changed it several times since the 80s, man. Like, if you look back at how they measured CPI back in the 80s, I've seen reports where our inflation numbers were actually like 16 maybe as much as 17% at its height. And I'll give you a couple examples of what they've changed. So the substitution method that they use now. So let's say that you went and used to buy steak for your groceries. Now you can, well, they'll say, oh, well, you can substitute chicken at a lower price. So there's not inflation there. Or let's say you used to buy a specific brand name toothpaste, for example. They'll say, well, you can buy a generic brand for the same price that you used to pay. So that's not inflation. Okay. So they've kind of been lying to us about how bad things are anyway. And I think we've been feeling it for sure as consumers. But regardless, inflation has still been pretty stubborn, and the market has been baking in all these rate cuts. They expected the Fed, I think at one point, people were expecting like 6 rate cuts this year, which is bullish. I mean, the economy has reacted really well to that, but it's looking more and more likely that we're going to have less rate cuts. I mean, I think right now they're expecting 4, maybe 3. And just a little background there, like the Fed meets, it's the Federal Open Market Committee. They have 8 meetings a year where they can adjust, interest rates, the Fed rate. So we have one coming up, I want to say in March, then May, and then I think June. And 3 weeks after those meetings, they release what are called the Fed minutes, where they give you a summary of what was discussed in that Fed meeting and what the sentiment is moving forward. But, Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, has basically said, like, hey, we're not going to cut rates in March. I would say at this point, it might be unlikely to see it in May. Maybe we see it in June. But I think for us, we need to start seeing interest rates cut in order to really have this bull run. But they also need a reason to cut rates. And that's the thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is, everyone's just expecting these rate cuts to happen. But for the Fed to be forced to cut rates, generally speaking, you have to have, a weakening job market or some sort of recession, historically speaking. And, so I'm not trying to be an alarmist here. I'm just saying, like, I think we're due for a recession. It's been since 2008, and historically speaking, like, these things happen. There's a reset. But I would say one thing that's a little bit different, that's kind of uncharted territory here, is that this is happening globally because COVID really pushed this thing forward, and every country in the world had to print money. And so everybody kind of impacted at the same time. So it's not just the US. So that's where no one really knows what's going to happen. And anyone that tells you they know what's going to happen, well, they're full of it, because no one knows for sure. But I would just say, I think right now people need to look at some of these warning signs and just, put that into their risk assessment here, because, we all want to see this bull market. Okay. And I think it could happen for sure. I mean, look, I'm very invested in this space, especially in DePIN, right? And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I think it's really important for people to kind of take off these rose-colored glasses and just make sure that, you're not. We saw it in the last market. So people were like taking out second mortgages on their home, like cashing out their 401k, going all in on this space. And I think that's super reckless anyway. But given some of the warning signs happening in the economy, if we have a recession, if anyone thinks that we're, everyone's just going to throw their money into crypto still, like I think we need to be real here. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think everything is going to drop out. So not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm just saying, like, take all possible scenarios into consideration is all.
And I completely agree. And this is a point that I've brought up for some time now. And it's not just the global economics, but some of the events that we've seen in crypto specifically that we'll bring up later on in the video. But I'm sure there will be people who are still wondering, well, what impact does this have on crypto? Because we've been told all along that crypto doesn't care about the regular economy. It's a completely separate entity altogether. And I would argue completely that is wrong. And we know that based on the impact of COVID, where we saw an economic panic, which really tanked the crypto market at that point in time. Of course, there was a recovery, and you can make the argument based on the stipend of cash that was given by the government, most of that, or much of that, I should say, found its way specifically into crypto centralized exchanges at that given amount. So there's, this, they are correlated. There is an impact here, in my opinion. I do believe that there are other factors that certainly come into play, like supply and demand, and of course, a lot of it's hype. Okay, but I believe there is certainly some manipulation going on behind the scenes with some of these trends inside crypto. Yes, there's numerous factors that go into this, but you cannot tell me that the way the money supply flows through the economy has no impact on crypto. Where do you think the money's coming from that actually people are using to speculate on these assets? So to me, it is like a complete disconnect in logic for people to continue repeating this. And I'll tell you that I don't like I don't like being a Debbie Downer, just like you. This does nothing for me when it comes to viewership. It would be much better for me to sell you stuff if I was telling you we're on the bull run, we're going up on that roller coaster right now, and we don't know where the end is, and we should all be excited and keep watching my videos. But the only real upside there is for us here to tell you these kinds of, let's say, not pessimistic, but realistic and cautious viewpoints is that you might trust us more. You might say, okay, these guys are giving us what I would say is maybe a hard truth, so I'll watch them. That's about the only thing we gain from this. And I agree fully with Brad here. And I know, we've talked to Pat, both of us, and he has the same sentiment. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing it from him because of his demeanor, but he's looked very closely at the macro and the micro trends. And of course, it hasn't happened yet. So people believe that, well, all these all these pessimists, all the bears, they were wrong. Mm, I'm I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
I'll say this much: like, I do think there would be a time where, and we've seen it a little bit, where there will be a decoupling with like Bitcoin, especially because
Yeah,
it could be a safe haven against all this reckless money printing that all these central banks are doing. Like, it's ridiculous, really. Um, I mean, they essentially like double their money supply, over, in a matter of a couple of years. I mean, that's crazy. But that said, like, I mean, but the question people might want to hear is like, or might be asking is, so what do we do? Like, should we not, get into this space? And I'll tell you what I'm doing. Not financial advice, but I have plenty of exposure to crypto, and but I do a lot of research before I invest in any projects, and especially before I build out fleets or businesses around these projects. But I'm certainly going to protect myself a little bit and take a little bit of money off the table when you have these crazy high multiples. Plus, I need to do it for tax purposes anyway, because when I'm mining in all my businesses, so I'm taxed based on my income. So I need to protect myself in case the market does drop. I'm still going to owe that money, right? So I'm I'm going to pull some money off the table. You can put it in money markets, get 5-6% that way. But that way you can still get exposure and get it, exposure to the potential bull market, but you're also protecting yourself. So I'm just saying, like, you need to take in consideration all possible scenarios and just don't get reckless, man. Like, I see people just pulling all their life savings out, throwing it in the market, like not doing research. And it's just, I guess that's really the main thing that, I wanted to make sure people are aware of, but it is an
yeah,
exciting space, man. So like, I don't want to be like all
yeah.
negative here. Like that, I do want to talk about DePIN for
Certainly.
sure.
I mean, I agree. The only financial advice that I can give is that if you make a significant investment in this and you don't have a financial professional guiding you through, that would be pretty reckless. That's the whole point we're getting to here is we're both of us are rethinking our strategy going forward. And I say I'm being certainly extra cautious. And for the past couple days, certainly I've rethought where my selling point will be and what I believe may come from the market, which I do want to talk about briefly. But I do want to ask you this question, Brad. Do you think, in your opinion, are we in or near the bull run that everyone's asking for? Or is would you say it's begun by now?
I think it's an interesting question. This market cycle has been certainly different. I think the ETFs, I think the Bitcoin ETFs are a lot of the reason why. We those got approved, and I know everyone's like, well, they got approved, and we didn't see much, price action. Well, it's kind of like the buy the rumor, sell the news type of deal, right? Like people were buying up ahead of the announcement, so we've seen amazing price action from like Bitcoin and really a lot of these alts, man. I mean, and it's come a lot earlier than the normal market cycle because generally you have the Bitcoin halving and a lot of consolidation leading up to that. And we might still have some consolidation and some corrections here. Like I wouldn't be at all surprised if in March leading up to the Bitcoin halving, we see some corrections. We've seen some pretty crazy pumps over the last couple of months. But that said, generally speaking, you have the Bitcoin halving, and then 3 to 6 months later is when the bull market ensues. We've kind of seen it start a little bit early, and I think the ETFs had a lot to do with that. But I don't think we have like retail is not in yet. When you get to the point where your barber is asking you about how to buy a meme coin, that's when the market's at the peak, right? And retail is coming to the space. I haven't heard much about that yet, and it gets in the news and all that. So I think we've had a little bit of a premature start to the bull market. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of consolidation, but I think April 20th is expected to be when the Bitcoin halving is, and things could get pretty fun. I'm hoping so, man.
Yeah.
I'm still building out fleets. I've got in Hivemapper, I've got 55 full-time drivers. I've got enough dash cams ordered to quadruple my fleet size. I've got like 170 vehicles on DIMO. I'm still adding there. I'm still managing or maintaining my helium build out. I've got like 60 rooftop installs. So like, plus I have other plays in the space that I'm just investing in the token. So like, I'm still like very excited about what's coming up. So I know we started off with like the potential downside, but I'm also managing that risk at the same time.
No, I'm also very optimistic within a realistic viewpoint, and I'm continue to expand my operations. But if this all went under tomorrow, I wouldn't be underwater myself. I'm not playing with money that I can't afford to lose. And for my situation, I think that's reasonable. And I know you've done like a very professional job at managing a fleet prior to this sizable increase in your operation. So you have all your ducks in a row. You understand the game well. And I won't speculate on your financial situation, but based on the caliber of the professionals that you're working with, I would assume that you haven't made any reckless decisions to lose money in this space. So like, yeah, this is the point I'm just trying to convey to the audience is you should not bet the farm that you're going to get rich on this stuff, because very likely if it's your first time around in crypto, disappointment is bound to happen.
I learned
If
that.
if you take issue with anything I say, feel free to chime in and say otherwise. But I'm
Dude, I learned that in the last market cycle. I mean, look, but there are times where I was like a 15-20x on something and didn't take any profits. And it doesn't mean that you don't believe in a project to take a little bit of money off the table, because if you don't, if things continue on these market cycles, and I want to talk about that a little bit too, but when a bear market hits, you're either selling at a huge loss or you're going to be holding for 3 years before your money comes back, and that project hopefully is still relevant. So keep that in mind when we get into the bull run, because it's really easy to just want to throw money at everything and just think that things are going to go up forever. But that generally, well, it's never happened before. I don't know that it's going to happen this time either. But I will say in the DePIN space, I think there's a huge opportunity here. And that's why I'm laser focused on this space. I mean, there's a number of factors why. Number one, I think it can bring a lot of non-crypto people into the space. Like in my fleet alone, I would say 80% of the people in my fleet have never had exposure to crypto before. So I'm kind of getting them introduced to the space, which is pretty exciting. But, globally, I think only 5% of people have crypto assets. So, that, increases your target audience by 20x, being able to bring non-crypto people in. Because, when you talk about crypto in general, the second you mention the word blockchain, people are like, you can see their brain shut off. The average person, they're like, oh, that's above my head. But if you explain, hey, you can put a dash cam in your windshield, collect street level imagery, and we're building the freshest map that's ever existed, and you get rewarded for it, like that resonates with people, right? So I think there's some really cool stuff happening in the space. The cloud computing and cloud storage side of things, like you look at Render is integrated with Apple, and they partner with Google and Microsoft. I mean, Render's doing massive things right now. I like Nosana. That was actually my best call in crypto so far. Like, so I covered that at like 2 cents. It's done like 190x in 3 months. Freaking ridiculous. But decentralized cloud computing protocols, I think, are going to do really well, because when you look at NVIDIA is adding in a month more value to their market cap than like the GDP of some countries. I mean, it's absurd. But it's this AI situation requires a lot of computing. And NVIDIA is manufacturing these high-end GPUs that are used for the computational power for AI. But there's definitely a shortage. There's a lot of bottlenecks when it comes to these high-end GPUs, because the microchips are manufactured by TSMC out of Taiwan. But it's not just for AI. Like, TSMC manufactures high-end microchips for like 90% of the world. It's not just well, you look at the top 5 companies. What do you have? You have Amazon, you have Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, drawing a blank on the other one, but all of them basically use TSMC, right? The US government uses TSMC, like everybody does. Apple's the other one I forgot about. So all of these companies are all going through TSMC out of Taiwan, which is, well, a lot of reason why people are paying such a close attention to that situation with China. But there's a further bottleneck. I went down this rabbit hole, put out a video on this on my channel, but the machines they use to manufacture those chips all come from ASML out of the Netherlands. They're the only company in the entire world that can manufacture these machines. And the laser has like 240,000 components in it. But you're talking about all this high demand for these GPUs, and really 2 companies that everything is running through. There's going to be bottlenecks, and that's what these decentralized cloud computing protocols are doing. They're allowing people that have idle GPUs. Think about Ethereum, for example, went to proof of stake. There's like 20,000 GPUs that all of a sudden couldn't be used to mine Ethereum. All of them are flooding into these cloud computing protocols, and it allows people to basically add their computing power to the cloud, and people can use it for AI and these other use cases, and you get compensated for it. That's what Render's doing. That's what Nosana is doing. I mean, that's freaking cool. On the storage side, Arweave is a really cool project. They're doing permanent storage, so you pay one time up front, your file stored on the blockchain forever. And the amount of usage that network's getting is crazy. We're seeing Helium come back, right? And with the mobile side of things, they're starting to actually generate revenue. I don't know if you've seen Wingbits. They're like monitoring like airspace, which is kind of interesting. Apparently, they're in some talks with some of the like big name companies that are interested in that data. Geospatial, you have Geodnet, and you have Onocoy, which is, I think both those are really cool projects, and there's a need for it. Teleport's doing decentralized rideshare application, which is really cool. I mean, Uber and Lyft have doubled their rates in the last 5 years, and the drivers are making like less money than they were before. So there's definitely space for a competitor to enter there. But the one category, Joe, that I'm most interested in is the sensor category. And that's around data collection. And that's like Hivemapper, okay, is a good example. DIMO, they're collecting telematics data. I think for me, like data is so valuable, and it has been for a long time. Like look at Google. One of Google's major revenue streams is our data that they've been selling, right? So you think about now with AI, to develop machine learning and to develop AI, you need data sets. So someone needs to collect the data. And on the other end of that, the AI and the machine learning makes the data more actionable and valuable too. So data is going to be more valuable than ever. And the other thing I like about these DePIN projects is, when you look at the other, look at the heliums, for example, you look at, render and these infrastructure networks that have to be built out. It really takes 2 market cycles for them to turn on revenue, because the first market cycle is building out the infrastructure and getting participation. And then, you need time for the manufacturers to actually build sensors, in Helium's case, to use the network, right? So it takes time for that all to happen. Whereas, so really, I think with those infrastructure plays, it's kind of a 2 market cycle play before revenue is generated. With sensor category in this data, we're seeing Hivemapper was generating revenue in the first year. DIMO's already started generating revenue. You can turn it on a lot faster. And that's really where that's the question I've been thinking about a lot over the last few weeks is, how do you take this narrative, if you will? Like everyone keeps talking about the DePIN narrative and the AI narrative. How do you turn it from a narrative into a legitimate sector with staying power? And how do you break this market cycle sentiment that we've seen since Bitcoin's inception, every 4 years, this bull and bear market. And to me, you have to solve the big issue with crypto in general, which, is the elephant in the room and no one wants to talk about, is where's the revenue, man? Like, who is going to be the project to turn on the revenue? Because if you have these crazy market caps every single market cycle, you can make a ton of money off these projects by, getting it at the right time. But then the bear market hits and everything kind of gets sucked out of the crypto market. So if you can actually bring in real revenue, what's that?
Infrastructure starts to disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I do believe, many of these projects do see genuine interest from the regular, B2B or regular business, and from professionals in the space. They say what you have going on is interesting, but it's not mature enough yet. Mm-hmm. It's not stable or reliable enough for us to utilize in the way we would like to. So we'll revisit again in X amount of years. I do believe that's happened with numerous projects in this space, and we'll see more utilization from some of them. And what I truly also believe is, in many cases, there have been certain projects that have done somewhat of a disservice overall because of management, or just basically, steps in learning being the initial projects to try and learn the hard way, and that's left a sour taste in certain people's mouths as far as actual business use case. And the vast majority of these projects, we're not going to see the everyday individual utilizing the DePIN networks. I don't think so. I'm sure there will be a few, but I don't see it as far as regular, everyday individual needs it for any given reason.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you don't necessarily need that to be the case. As long as, in my opinion, for every one of these projects, the number one thing I look at is, okay, where's the utility? What's the potential market? What's the potential revenue they're moving into? Because that's the most important thing, is, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you need to have the potential to tap into revenue to have staying power. And then once you've identified that sector, like, okay, what's the differentiator? Is it that you can offer cloud computing or cloud storage at a lower cost? Is it like Hivemapper, that you can get fresher street level imagery that's valuable, that's never existed before? You have to have a differentiator. the next part I look at is like, okay, participation. What are the barriers to entry? What's the cost for someone to participate? You know, in the case of driving a vehicle, well, there's hundreds of millions of vehicles on the road every day. So that's a huge target audience to tap into to participate. And then it's like, okay, so how many participants do you need to move the needle? So, you know, in Hivemapper's case, you know, to get global coverage up to a point where that data is valuable, what's that number? How many participants do you need? And is that viable? And I think in their case it is. And then the third thing I look at is the team. Like I don't invest in anything unless that the team is doxed, man. Like I want to look at them. I look on LinkedIn. I look at their complete background, their work history. I want to know the team is not only committed, but able to execute. Because if you can have all the potential revenue in the world, you can have all the participation in the world. But if you don't have a team that can execute and actually get consumers to buy the data or use the network on the back end, like none of that matters. And then lastly is
agree.
Yeah, man. And then lastly is tokenomics, like understanding how the tokens are distributed and what the unlock periods are. And I know that's like a sore subject, but people shouldn't be surprised by any of this stuff. If you're investing in a project, you should read the tokenomics and understand what that looks like and do your price projections to see if it's something you want to get involved in or not. Like, but all those are important factors and things that you should be looking at if you're going to invest your money in something, not financial advice. But
Well,
it is.
if I may add,
What's that?
I've spoken to so many people over the years who have come to me asking about this information after the fact, after they've had already purchased thousands of dollars worth of hardware for specific projects. And I of course, will provide them the information that they've asked for without criticism and try to point them in the right direction. But it does boggle my mind. I have to say, the amount I find it to be quite irresponsible, personally.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem.
No, I completely agree, man. I mean, I think a lot of people want to get really crazy returns without having to do the research and put in the work. And it's like, that's risky, man. I mean, all of this, I mean, everything in this space has higher risk than other areas that you could invest in, but there's with that risk that I think there is also upside. But I think that this cycle, to your point, right? A lot of these networks are on their second market cycle now. You look at like Helium, Render was around, Arweave was around. A lot of these protocols now, I think, can turn on the revenue of this market cycle. And I think these data, the sensor category, like the Hivemappers and the DIMOs, they can actually do it in one market cycle where they can turn the revenue on faster. So that's what I'm really interested to see is like which projects will it happen, right? Will they turn on meaningful revenue? I'm not talking about 50 grand a month. I'm talking about millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue is what I'm talking about, you know, to where you can start to justify some of these market caps. If that happens, I think you can break this whole market cycle sentiment to an extent and insulate yourself from the downturn, because most of these projects in the DePIN space have this burn to mint equilibrium where, you know, as revenue comes into the project, it has to go and buy tokens and burn it out of the supply. So if you have enough revenue coming into the project that puts buying pressure on the token, you can offset a lot of that selling pressure. So if a project has the ability to turn on enough revenue, I think for the first time ever, we could see some of these have justifiable market caps and actually, you know, I'm not saying they won't go down in a bear market, but they might be able to insulate themselves to an extent compared to the other projects in the space. And that's what I'm excited to see. Yeah, man.
Yeah, there's one thing that does bother me about some of the, you know, wild speculation in this space on projects that many people will say, you know, I know it's a scam or a Ponzi and I know I can make money off of this, so I'm going to throw in anyway. It's like, well, not a good idea. You might not be at the top of the pyramid like you think you are, but either way, you are part of the issue because you enable these types of this problematic behavior to go on with your money. Even if you're getting a return, you know, it's a problem. It's already a problem enough that many of these projects, the only reason that they're profitable, let's face it, is because of wild speculation, not
Yeah.
because they have a larger amount of inflow of value than the outflow of value through token emissions. We're waiting to see which project will be the first to actually eclipse that in a meaningful way, rather than, we've seen it through gas fees, I would argue, with some blockchains, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that meaningful usage. I would say probably Hivemapper is looking like it will be the first to bust down that door and prove that it can be done, as far as a greater inflow of value versus outflow through token distribution.
It certainly can happen. I think the team is the right team to do it, to execute. And the question I have though is, like, there's a huge demand pent up for, dash cams. But can they scale up production, and can they do it quickly enough to get global coverage up to generate this revenue? Because I know Ariel, he's like, hey, we're building something real. And I believe that they are. We're trying to build something real here. But when you're involved in the crypto market, there's a little bit of a clock, as much as you hate to admit it, because if they don't turn on revenue and before the bear market hits, you're subject to a downturn. That's just what it is. It's the nature of the beast. So yeah, so if they can scale up production and get a couple big name customers that they can announce buying this data, and they can actually start getting some like long-term contracts in, because what they're doing right now is really proof of concept, and that's normal, in any type of, especially in tech, right? You need to have these conversations with businesses and do a proof of concept to show that, hey, the data is actionable in the back end, it's valuable to you, and then you ink long-term deals. But you need the coverage first. Like, I guarantee they've been having a ton of these conversations over the last year, and customers are like, well, once you get that to 90%, coverage refreshed every couple of days, like, we're really interested. We're starting to get to that inflection point with map coverage in a lot of the areas of the world now, to where this data does have real value. So that's what I'm interested to see. Like, I think you're right. I think they can flip the script here and make this real. But the hardware thing is a problem right now, where it's so backed up.
Yeah.
Like, they need to really scale up production, because there's a ton of demand to be out there mapping, man. But
yeah, there certainly is. Go ahead.
There you go. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, what are the points I want to jump in here? I know you did touch on crypto a little bit, and it's not just coming from the Hivemapper team themselves. There's numerous other projects in the DePIN space who will, say, we don't care about crypto. It's about the utility use case. It's about the service that we're providing. And look, you wouldn't have your mass coverage without the crypto side of things. Simple as that. Hate to break it, and I know it's hard for some of these people to because I get it. There's tired of hearing people complain about the price and returns and the tokenomics and the decisions that were made. But you do have to come to the realization, no matter how much you despise crypto, it's probably in 99.9% of cases what is making this bootstrapping of your protocol, of your project, feasible.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So to ignore it, or to say you don't care, is just terrible. Like, public relations wise, there's a terrible message, and it doesn't sit well with the community. And you just have to kind of understand the sad truth that most of the people, they don't care about your utility. They're here to make money, which I don't like the attitude myself.
Yeah.
I think it's counterproductive. How about let's contribute to this project to have some fair compensation? But it's a reality, and it's something I also have to grapple with as a YouTuber when I hear these types of gripes. So I can sympathize with the things that I hear sometimes from the leadership on not liking crypto. But look, aside from the fact that it's what's bootstrapping these networks, it's also your investors in many cases are promised a significant fortune of the in percentage of those token emissions. So let's not kid ourselves and pretend like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Sorry, a little tangent,
No,
but
that's fair. I mean, it does matter, and they wouldn't be able to drive this much participation if they weren't in this space, right? So, um, with that said, like people that are looking at these rewards right now for Hivemapper, I mean, just like any of these projects, like they're going to decrease over time. The amount of rewards we're seeing is not sustainable, and I think it'll still be to a point where it makes sense to participate for sure. Like the crypto space is so much different than other areas of investment, right? People, if you get a 5-year ROI elsewhere, you're like, oh, that's good. People want like a 2-week ROI in the crypto space, and I think the expectations sometimes get set a little unrealistic, especially with the rewards recently. But they're going to keep adding regions because ultimately they need to get coverage across the world for this thing to happen. Okay. If we don't do that, then this is all it is a narrative, right? All it is people can make a bunch of money in the next year or two and then it fizzles away. Like if we want this to be a legitimate project and have real revenue coming through the door, well, you need to advance the project. And that means getting more coverage. I mean, that's just what it is. So I think we need to keep like the bigger picture in mind here, and be realistic with your expectations. And I know it's going to be a long wait before ordering now until August. Like a lot can change between now and then, but I'd say just do your research. But with that, something else you mentioned earlier too is like this space. You need to be really, really careful because DePIN is starting to gain a lot of traction, and I can already see it. I mean, they're starting like, some of these projects that are popping up are just attaching DePIN to their project, and just be really, really careful. Don't just throw money at everything that says they're DePIN because when there's vultures out there that can think they can take your money, they're going to do it. And, there's gonna be rug pulls in DePIN for sure. I mean, there probably already have been. So I would just say like, make sure to do your due diligence and know what you're getting into before you attach yourself to anything that just says that they're DePIN. Okay.
and another thing that I take issue with is much of the, I don't want to call it groupthink. We might use the opposite term of think here, as as they say, aping in or degenning, which people think it's cool to YOLO all their finance in because hey, I'm going to impress my friends on the Twitter Spaces, and it is a it's a bad attitude. It's an irresponsible attitude, but
Yeah.
it seems to be the trend. And I'm also seeing a lot of entrants from other spaces of crypto where that is a fairly common, uh, you know, that's what they do. Spend their money on stuff that like meme
The
coin
grifters.
stuff that has on what? Yeah, grifters, sure. I mean, but
Yeah.
even people who are just, I don't know where they get their money to spend like that. I really don't. Like that's
Yeah.
totally irresponsible in my opinion, but it's a contagious attitude, and it's spreads like wildfire. And then we're seeing, everyone keeps saying the DePIN narrative. Last cycle was DeFi, this time will be DePIN. So all the NFT crowd rushes in, and we're
Yeah.
going to see a lot of the bleed over from that style of marketing and operation within the DePIN space. Sure as I'm sitting here,
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it, man.
it's going to be bad.
Hey,
It's going to be bad.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why you have to, man, just be really aware, and just do research. Don't go willy nilly and stuff. Before we kick things or before we close things out, man, are there any projects that you are really looking at right now, like in the DePIN space or even outside of the DePIN space that you're excited about outside of Hivemapper? We talked about that a lot.
Too early to mention, but I'm always eyeing something up. But I don't like giving free shouts. I shouldn't say free shouts. I say I want to double verify before
That's fair.
making before drawing attention.
That's fair.
What about you?
Like DIMO, I think has been consolidating for a while, and it hasn't gotten the same attention as some of the other DePIN projects because it's built on Polygon. And I
Mhm.
think like all these Solana-based projects have been pumping like crazy.
Mhm.
I think Polygon is people are sleeping on it, man. Like Polygon is going to have major resurgence, in my opinion. And I think DIMO is primed, man. Not financial advice, but I'm very bullish on the project. Like I have 170 vehicles connected. I'm adding to it. And we haven't seen the same type of action that we've seen from some of these other DePIN projects in the Solana ecosystem. So
Yeah.
I think when Polygon has this resurgence, I could see DIMO making some big moves. We'll see. But I'm really
I think,
excited about that.
let me answer. Actually, I do know an answer to your question, and that would be one that you're also eyeing up is Onocoy. And I did interview the
Yeah,
team with Pat months ago, and they're very impressive. They have a vast education and proven skill set within the sector, and I think they're about to really light up the space and give Geonet some serious competition. So
I
I'm
agree.
definitely going to pick up some hardware and get on that once I have the money to do so.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, you can earn their the Bono token because they're in beta, and then it'll go to the ONO token. But um, yeah, man, I think that the geospatial sector, because I worked in the drone space, drone service space prior to my job now, and there's a huge need for that. You can get very, very precise geospatial location data, versus GPS is accurate to an extent, but like for drone surveys, if you're doing like rooftop measurements or you're doing topography measurements, being able to tap into a network like that, it's incredibly valuable. So from what I've heard, man, the Onocoy team, I need to do some more research, but I've heard that they are a super solid team. And I do investment in Geonet as well, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what Onocoy is going to do. And that's a project I definitely want to get some exposure to.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're going to do big things
Unfortunately,
for
I
sure.
did miss getting in on Geonet. That was one that piqued my interest at one point, but I just didn't have it in me to commit based on just a gut feeling, also paired with some research that was not compelling enough at the time. Now, of course, if I look back, I would say um, my my intuition there was a little bit off. They did better than I expected, and good on them. I do want to see projects succeed
Yeah.
in this space. It benefits everyone that even if it's ones that I've covered extensively on this channel before and take issue with what happened. It's best for all of us to succeed, and hopefully in a honest way, and you know
Yeah. Well,
but
I
I'm
mean,
very excited. I'm very excited.
yeah, GeoNet's interesting because they don't even have a burn and mint equilibrium. That's just a burn. Like, so as revenue comes in, they burn tokens out of supply, and you can see it all on chain. Like they've burned a substantial amount of tokens already from revenue coming in. So I think they're both gonna be viable projects, and there's a need for it for sure. So I'm
And
excited
it,
about it.
this, that's always the thing that I wonder. And now that you say that, I'm glad to hear that's what those Twitter posts are about, because I thought they were just burning tokens to burn tokens, and the crowd goes wild even though they burn 0.001%. It's like, woo, like you get that kind of reaction out of the crypto crowd, and they don't convey to us it was based on a customer purchase. It's like basic communication, in my opinion. But that's why I've always been critical of those posts. It's like, I don't understand what the big deal is when you've only burned, a not even a 1% of your token supply, but
Yeah.
that
Let me
makes
look
me
here.
feel better about it.
I'm gonna pull it up right here. So it looks like they burned 4.64 million tokens. So almost a 0.5% of their total token supply. I mean, that's 467,000. I mean, that's That's pretty solid, man. And as more revenue comes in, there are gonna be more token burns. But it's gonna be interesting to see how that impacts price, because most of these other projects, you burn the tokens out and then they're redistributed and reminted to participants. In this case, it's completely deflationary. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, how that impacts the price moving forward as more revenue comes in. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a different tokenomics than some of the other projects in the space, but we'll see what happens. Cool, man.
That's all I got. Unless you want to get deeper into the crypto side, but I think we should save that for the next video. I think we can go enough with some of the other incidents, trends, events that I'm seeing in the crypto space that I don't feel so bullish on, but there are plenty of others that, exciting. I feel bullish. Seen some great developments. So I think we'll do that a couple weeks from now.
Sounds good, man. Hey, Joe, thanks for having me on as always. It was a pleasure. I think it was fun. Always fun to talk about this stuff, man. Cause my friends I can't talk to my friends about it anymore. So they're like, dude, stop talking about crypto. So it's always nice to talk to somebody else that's in the space.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on. And I think you provide a lot of value with the information that you're willing to put out there. So whenever I see new faces such as yourself appear in the YouTube space, of course I like to support them and help. It helps me when you come on because you're making easy content in a sense, but I also want to draw attention to the people who are going to provide a fresh perspective and make a difference and give the honest truth. And I think you really go above and beyond in your videos. And everyone who watches this, I encourage you to subscribe to Brad. It's great content all around, well researched, and always a good friend there to answer my questions when I have them. So
I appreciate it, man. No, you have been super helpful, man, for sure. I appreciate it. And starting to get a little traction, so it's exciting, man. But awesome. Well, have a good weekend.
All right.
And thanks all for viewing.